All right, boys and girls. So today, instead of learning a new poetry technique, I want to work on revising some of the poems that we already wrote last week. I had a chance to read some, and one thing that I noticed was a lot of you are writing your poems more like in the form of a paragraph as opposed to in the form of a poem, using what we call line breaks or stanzas. So today we're going to do a day of revision, and we're going to see how we can revise the poems that we've already written to look more like actual poetry as opposed to paragraph writing. So several things to ask yourself of your poems during the revision process. Does my poem read more like a paragraph than a poem? Does my poem have stanzas with shorter sentences as opposed to a paragraph with longer sentences? And does my poem have a natural pause or rhythm to it? So line breaks. Line breaks have several purposes. One thing that you can do with line breaks is change the rhythm or the meaning or really the impact or the depth of the poem. Also, when you're using line breaks, you are giving your poem natural places for your reader to pause, and that also adds depth and rhythm. So let's take a look at this poem. Sunbeams stretching over shadows while I walked down the sidewalk. I was careful not to step on any cracks. I chased after my own shadow, but I couldn't catch up. Let's ask ourselves, did this poem read more like a paragraph? Are there shorter sentences with natural spots or places to pause? And does the poem have rhythm? What do you think? To me, it sounded more like just a paragraph, right? Like I was just reading a paragraph from a story that somebody wrote. Also, I didn't hear any rhythm to it. And without rhythm, there's really no impact or depth. And poetry has a purpose, and it should be, to impact us some way or make us feel something or make us think something. But if you're just reading any old regular paragraph, that's not really going to happen, right? So let's go ahead and use one strategy for figuring out how to make line breaks. One thing you can do is go through the poem that you've already written and highlight or circle or underline some key words from the poem. For example, in this poem, I highlighted the words or phrases, sunbeams, stretching over shadows, step on cracks, my own shadow catch up. Then what I did was I made each of those highlighted words or phrases its own line. So now I basically have a new poem. Sunbeams, stretching over shadows, step on cracks, my own shadow, catch up. It's giving you the same idea as the original version, but now it has line breaks, it has places where I can stop, it creates rhythm, and it gives you time to kind of step back and think about what exactly is the poem really about. Okay, let's look at another poem and see how we can create line breaks, okay? Again, we want line breaks so that we can create rhythm, places for pause, impact. Last night after you hung up, I wrote you a poem hoping it might change your heart. This morning I tell myself, get serious, man. Someone once compared writing a poem and hoping it will change the world to dropping rose petals down a deep well waiting for the splash. Okay, so another strategy is to read the poem aloud and consider where there could be natural pauses. And we're gonna mark those areas of natural pause with two little slanted slash marks. So I went through the poem myself, and every point that I felt that there was a place to naturally pause, I put the two little slash marks, okay? Once I did that, wherever there's a slash mark, you then go ahead and use a line break or start a new line. And so based on the slashes that I used, this is now what my poem would look like, as opposed to the original version where it was just one big jumbled together paragraph. You'll notice that now you have shorter sentences, you have stanzas with white space, and your poem now takes on more meaning and has more impact and depth. Okay, now it's your turn. I want you to go ahead and try this in your notebook with this poem. Go ahead and quickly write down this poem in your notebook. When the sun shines through the leaves of the apple tree, when the sun moves shadows of the leaves of the apple tree, then I pass on the grass. Highlight key words. Mark natural pauses with the slash marks. Think about the rhythm you want to create. Then you're going to create stanzas to use more white space and look for patterns. Okay, so these are two different ways that I could have revised that poem with line breaks. When the sun shines through the leaves of the apple tree, when the sun makes shadows of the leaves of the apple tree, then I pass on the grass. When the sun shines through the leaves of the apple tree, when the sun makes shadows of the leaves of the apple tree, then I pass on the grass. Again, notice that it's not one jumbled up full paragraph. It has more meaning, it has more depth, and it definitely has more rhythm because we're taking time to pause in naturally pausing places. All right, so your assignment today is I want you to go to the 4th grade poetry Padlet, which I posted on Google Classroom, and I want you to reread any poems that you've already read. So that means the immersion poems, the repetition poems, and the onomatopoeia poems. Please don't go ahead to other techniques because we're going to be doing those each day. So go ahead and reread any poems that you already read. Think about and notice how the poets are using line breaks and what type of rhythm and depth those line breaks are creating in each poem. Then I want you to go back to some of the poetry you've already written in your notebook, and I want you to try revising some of those poems with the technique in mind that we just learned, okay, using line breaks. If you want, you can revise a poem that you already posted to our Padlet. Once you change it, you can resubmit it for approval, and then I'll approve it. Then I want you to try writing out some new poetry using line breaks and post one of those poems to our Mr. DiRienzo's Poetry Paradise Padlet.